So good morning, everyone. This morning, I have great pleasure in interviewing the amazing Fiona Scott, who is an editor and journalist and achieving great things for people out there, getting them in the news and getting them wherever they need to be out there in the world of media. So good morning, Fiona. Thank you for participating in this interview this morning.
Morning, everyone, and thank you, Cheryl, for inviting me.
Oh gosh, I'm so excited to explore with you what's been going on for Fiona. So we were talking a bit earlier about yourself and your childhood, because obviously you're into communication, and I was really interested in the throat chakra with regards to the energy and the power you put or you're able to project out there, and really interested in your childhood development as well, you know, because when it comes to the throat chakra, looking at this child development phase that it links to 6 to 12, and really looking at, well, what was going on for Fiona when she was this evolving child, you know, what took her at that early age from where she was into the world of words and communication and being out there and sharing words with people. So could you share with us, you know, what your journey was?
Well, I was born in 1966, so my mum had me at the age of 23, and she was a stay-at-home mum. My dad worked as a welder, so he worked in a low-income job, and both of them suddenly had this child who was really hard to manage from birth, I understand, actually. And as I went to school at the age of 6, they were both told, my mum was told, that I was retarded. I was retarded, particularly when it came to reading. I have no memory of that, but I suspect what happened was that my mum shared, because like me, she's a sharer, she's a heart on a sleeve type person. She shared it with our neighbours, who were called Ken and Wynne, and they had no children of their own. And we were really close to them. And I remember distinctly, but I can't remember when it started happening, that I would go round for at least an hour a night after school, probably more, and we'd do things like, she'd teach us to cook, she would teach us to tie our shoelaces. My sister's 5 years younger than me. And to read. So we would read comic books and books. We were, in my house, there weren't books. We didn't have books. My mum was very religious, and we had a Bible. My dad hardly read at all. He was not at all into the world of academia. So a lot of that happened next door, and they were really integral and important part of my life early on. And it's only when you asked me that question, it suddenly clicked into place that is what happened. And in the early part of my life, they encouraged us and prompted us to read. And the other person who did was my paternal grandfather. So my dad's dad, Ben, at about the same age, about 7 to 8, I remember distinctly one moment him sitting me down and I can see his hand now touching my arm, saying to me, Fiona, the only way this family will get on is through education. It's education, education. You have got to work hard at school. Now, this was a man who left school at 11, taught himself to read, read his whole life, from newspapers to books, and that really sat with me. And given that he passed away when I was 12, so my first major loss in my life as well, I've always stuck to that. And yet, I wasn't always the most intelligent kid at school. I was always one of those kids that was fairly good, but never top of the class. But somehow I had this inner belief that I had to just keep going and doing what I was doing, and it would be enough.
Wow, that's it. Almost like makes the hairs prick up on the back of my neck, you know, to know that you found somebody, because sometimes kids don't find somebody, do they? They never find that link in the chain that's missing for them, where somebody can almost like show them the way. How significant do you think those neighbours and your grandfather was in you developing this belief in yourself?
I think absolutely critical. absolutely critical. I'm not having a go at my parents. They were doing the best that they could at the time, living hand to mouth. There was no spare money. My dad, bless him, was quite an old-fashioned guy. My mum grew up really wanting to work and have a career, but not being allowed to by the situation she was in. And I think that the fact that my parents allowed other adults to influence us, and even though sometimes they got a bit cross about it, but they allowed them to be part of my life particularly, was a really important thing. Now I look back as an older woman. My granddad, the most important thing with him was education, but also I knew instantly with him that I was the most important person in his life, and that he looked up to me. My sister didn't come along for another 5 years and didn't know him as well as me. And, you know, if I think about my achievements in life and the people who'd be proud of me, he's always there.
Right. What significant things did he do to show you he believed in you?
It's really simple little things, like we used to see him every week, and you know, they lived about a mile away, so he always walked. He would sit down and ask me what I'd been doing. What has my week been like? What had I experienced? Did I have any problems? It was like I could download my week to him and we'd discuss it. If I was reading a book, he would ask me about it. And, you know, was there anything I didn't understand? Was there anything that I wanted to explore with me? He was just genuinely interested in me and what I was doing, which is an amazing thing when you're only, you know, a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also by example, he lived a simple life.
Yeah.
But the one thing I remember about him was that people were always coming to the house. He was really a popular man. He used to he was a coal miner, but he used to shave their hair. I remember this little Bakelite shaver thing. So men would turn up in the house and he'd sit in the kitchen and shave their head, and I could hear them chatting about things. So he was chatty and sociable, even though he led what some people would think was a very small life. And I just think that as a kid, you absorb these experiences without realising until much later in your life how important they are. So it was the little things, it wasn't big things.
So in a way, he treated you like an adult, like an equal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I suppose that is it. I think he did treat me like an equal, and just made me feel that I had value. He was really interested in me, even though I was quite small. And he wasn't caught up in the day-to-day that parents can get caught up, the day-to-day provision for you, cleaning the house, you know, doing the cooking, doing the cleaning, where you often, I find this myself with my own children, you don't have time to sit down with your kids and just chat to them. How are you feeling today? What's happening?
Yeah.
And he did that. And for all my 4 grandparents, I knew all of them, he was the only one.
Right. So in some ways, he was like this big parent figure, but he wasn't that almost like big character to you. He was just somebody you would sit with you. Yeah. He wasn't
Yes.
a preach. He was very
Yes.
much somebody who you would feel comfortable just talking to. Do you think that's perhaps where you got your confidence from to speak to anyone?
I think actually what it does is it makes me realise that everyone is interesting. There isn't one person who isn't interesting, and giving people the time to tell their stories, in many ways for me it's a really selfish thing, because I am horribly nosy. I'm nosy about people if they want to share, and I'm genuinely interested. I believe in being in the present. When I'm with someone and I'm working with them, I am totally focused on them during that time, and I've always been like that.
Right.
It could be a homeless guy in the street, or it could be a lord and lady of the land. When I'm with them, I'm interested in them, and I think that's because someone was interested in me in exactly the same way.
It almost feels like when you're talking about how you associate with people and that being present with them and being interested in simple stuff as well, it almost feels like a replication of your relationship with your granddad.
Yeah, I think it is. And also, I just think that when you exhibit those feelings with someone, they feel that energy, so they respond to that. I will find this happened to me hundreds of times throughout my career, but even in simple things like networking with other business owners, the amount of times I've chatted to someone and got them and just listened to them, and then suddenly they burst out crying, sharing something completely unrelated to business, completely unrelated to the reason why they're there, just because I think I've given them an opportunity to get it out, to let emotion out.
Wow.
And that's a really powerful thing, and I think I'm very blessed to have that. I mean, one example I can give you is I spoke to a business owner at a networking event, and we had a one-to-one, really classic thing that you do in networking, and we were chatting, and I was asking him to talk about his business, and he suddenly told me this whole story about how his brother had been murdered. Years before, and started crying. Nothing to do with our conversation, it just came out. And then what often happens when something like that happens, that was a dramatic example, is people will say, I'm so sorry, I've got upset. And I always say to them, no, you needed to share that, and it's fine.
Yeah. So I've been very privileged because I saw you almost like as a caterpillar come into setting up your business and making that decision to move from being employed to becoming self-employed. And then also watching you, it's almost like as though I could see the self-belief suddenly take over you. And you were away, you were flying. Can you take us through your journey of, you're working for somebody, then deciding to become your own boss, and then when you found this inner belief, what happened and where you've gone since then?
Okay. My situation was that I had my dream job. I had my dream job. I absolutely loved it. I was a series producer for ITV. I'd worked really hard to get that position, and I loved it. There wasn't a day at work I didn't love. Managing TV programs, managing the budgets, recruiting the teams, creating programs which were then aired to audiences of hundreds of thousands of people. It's fantastic. And in about 2007, I realised I was going to lose my job. Not just me, a load of people in ITV, because ITV were making different strategic business decisions. And I was at a crossroads then. So if I wanted to work in television full time, I would need to be in London or Manchester, which are the two biggest TV hubs, or Cardiff, full time. And I knew I'd get some redundancy money, and loads of people in the media are freelance, but that was never going to be me, because I didn't want that. I wanted certainty in my life. I wanted to know how much I'd earn each month. But when I sat down and weighed up with my husband, who makes me do these things because he's a very detailed man, made up the pros and cons of being freelance, and that was my mindset at the time, I thought, look, if I'm ever going to try it, it's got to be now. I've got a bit of redundancy money, which gives me a buffer. So that's what I did. And I set up a very small PR business in the background, bumping along with a business partner. Because that felt really safe, and she wanted to do that. By the way, anyone listening to that who's thinking of that, don't do it. That's all I'm saying, just don't do it. But it felt very safe and comfortable not to be doing it on my own. And, I bimbled along for a few years before I met you really, or knew you really well. And that was fine. So my majority of my work was taking contracted television work. So I worked on The One Show, I worked on X-Ray, in Wales, I worked on various different programs with the PR company bumping along in the background. And my goals were modest. I wanted to recreate my salary plus a bit. So I thought if I could get to 50,000 turnover, I would do quite well. So I hit about 40,000 turnover. And then in about 2013, I had an epiphany, which came from you, actually. You probably don't realise this. You asked me to do a talk on finance in business, and I am not financially intelligent. I know how to balance a budget and manage a sum of money and not go over budget, but I can't do profit and loss and projections and all of that stuff. It doesn't interest me. I find it boring. But you asked me to, and as a result of that, I went back and tracked through invoicing of the PR clients I had, not the TV work, the PR clients. And when I looked at that, I realised that although my partner was in the business, she'd actually, excuse me, I'm back to sneeze, hay fever, sorry guys and gals. I realised that when I'd actually looked at the invoicing, the only person who'd brought business into the company was me.
Right.
100%. And I wasn't even working on it full time. So I thought, right, okay, I've got to learn from this. So the 2 learnings I got was to part ways with my business partner, which she totally agreed with. It was not an easy conversation, but she kind of sort of, I think she thought that she'd be better at business than me because she looked the part, if you see what I mean. But actually, I was doing the delivery. And I kind of had to decide that if I could bring business in when I wasn't working full time, what could I do if I worked full time? And that was the point where I started very tentatively to do far less television work and far more business, and started to learn how to run a business. But it was really scary to do it on my own, even though she'd done virtually nothing to bring business in. It was a mentally scary thing. And that was how I slowly started to move away from my modest goals of 40 to 50k a year turnover to gradually move further along the line. And I don't think there was 1 minute where I suddenly thought, I got this. I think what I learned was that if you track, even in a minor way, your progress, even something as simple as looking at where did that first contact come from, just do a little bit of measurement. If you're not into that, it made me realize that I could do it. Yeah. That I just could do it. And so I gradually and gently moved forward.
Yeah. When did you have your butterfly moment where you went from this caterpillar into your butterfly? When did that sort of fall into place? Because I actually saw your energy shift.
Yeah, it came really, for me, the critical year in business came in around 2013. So it was when I started to go on my own. And I remember one of the first people I'd outsourced to was an accountant, for all the reasons I'd expressed earlier. I realised very quickly that that was not my forte, and I needed an accountant. It wasn't just going to rock up and do the accounts once a year. I needed someone who was more there for me more continuously, and that was going to cost me more. So that was the first big expense I made in my business, which to me was huge. But the minute I did that, she said to me, right, okay, Fiona, do you want to be a successful freelancer, which you already are, or do you want to run a business? Because you need to decide it. And I instantly knew it was about running a business for me. And I think that was the moment when I thought, I can do this. And I started to think about goals, and I started to think about value and packages and owning it and working with the right people and having the right customers and learning about myself as an individual, what I do well, what I don't do well. And I've absolutely loved it. And when I turned 50, I had a party to raise money for charity with my business friends.
I was there.
Sorry? Yeah, that's right. And I gave a talk, and it wasn't until I stood up and I talked about that I realised that I had created my own dream job after losing my dream job, which I had no influence over whatsoever, to creating my dream job, which I control. And how the hell had I done that? A lot of me still thinks, how the hell did that happen? But I think actually it was working with an accountant who's the absolute opposite of me, who challenged me and set me on the path, really. I still work with her now.
A lot of people are afraid of numbers and almost feel as though they just don't believe in the numbers, or don't believe in themselves being able to deliver against the numbers. Numbers seem to be a big deal. How did you get over that for you to actually start believing you could deliver against numbers?
I think that the first thing is understand what your relationship with numbers and finance and detail is. So I understood, there are various ways of doing it, but get some training around your personality. I mean, you're really good with that stuff, Cheryl. Get some training around your personality and understand where you are and accept yourself. I am not a numbers person. I can balance a budget. That's not the same as planning in business. It's not the same. Obviously, you have to have an eye to cash flow and all of that. So if you can't do it, get someone who can and invest in that, and find the right person. Understand exactly what your needs are. And that way, I've got someone who holds me to account, who understands my financial goals. And also the other thing is I started to understand that money was not my key driver. It's actually, if you look at drivers, it's actually the second or the third for me. My key driver is value and respect. And once you understand where you sit amongst in your sector, if you like, around value and respect, I want to be valued and respected. And one of the ways in which you are valued and respected is to be paid what you are worth. And you set that against what is reasonable in your sector where you live. So I know exactly what PR people in the Southwest charge for the services that they offer. I know where I sit in that. And therefore I am now unafraid. If you don't want to pay my prices, that's absolutely fine. You're not my customer and I'm not right for you, because I know where I sit. And that works either way as well. Some people want to pay more because they want someone who's got the glossy offices and everything looks great and that they'll already look very corporate, and that's fine. I also know, and I'm not afraid to call out on snake oil, and you know me, I'll call out BS, health warning, you're going to get honesty and bluntness with me, because a part of my values for my business are honesty and integrity, and I will tell you the truth even if you don't want to hear it. Because at the end of the day, you'll go round and round in circles, trying different things, and you'll come back to the same basic truth in business. So it was about owning who I was, understanding what my numbers were, where did I want to go. I remember distinctly a few years ago now, the first year my business hit a 6-figure turnover. And you might think I was dancing around the room with that. But actually, I was terrified because I'd worked so hard that year and I felt like I couldn't sustain that level of energy anymore. So again, that was a conversation with my accountant where I said, this actually scares me. It's way beyond the modest goals I ever had. And what we actually did was, based upon that, we came up with a plan to pull back a bit and move forward in a smarter way that used less of my time. Because I find for many women in business, if they're honest, they have to balance their need for money against the preciousness, the value of time. And that's when we started, my accountant and I had conversations and planning around how much do I want to earn, how much profit do I want to make, and what time do I want to have. And taking COVID out of it, my turnover never dropped below that level since then, just by being smarter. So I would say and don't be embarrassed to talk about money. Women are terrible about talking about money. And it's like they've got to apologise for success. Or if, you've got, a multi-million pound business, don't be embarrassed, just be factual. I think a lot of women worry about being seen as being boastful or arrogant. No, be factual. You don't have to go out there and say, look at me, the great I am, I've done this, that or the other. What you need to do is just state things in a factual way. And there are loads of business women that are far more successful than me, and good luck to them. Their goals are probably different to mine, and that's fine. I now know, and I say without any agenda, that if I had started a business in my 20s instead of in my 40s, I would be a millionaire today.
Why is
but that was not my job, because I know how to make money now. I know how to make money. It's just that my goals in my 40s, when my life was, with a family and a husband and a marriage, all that were even more important to me than business, though business is high up there, my goals were not that. If I'd started in my 20s and learned what I know now, I would be a millionaire, if not a multimillionaire, because I would have got that hunger a lot earlier. I would have built a business, I might have sold it or kept it as a sole business and then gone into other things and invested. I would have kept on going, because this business is a game. It's full of energy, it's full of life, it's exciting. There's always new things to learn. Every day is a school day, and I would have loved it. It's just that I wasn't ready at that time.
I'm interested to know where you got your values from, because you've talked about integrity and respect and value. Where did those values come from in order to now turn up in your business?
Well, first of all, I think they come from you intuitively and your background and what anybody brings to the table as a human being based upon their life experience. I would probably relate that heavily to my father. So although he was a low-income welder, And I lost him when I was 31. So he died of a heart attack when he was 58. He was one of the most honest and principled men that I've ever met. He was pretty laid back. You would have to do a lot to rile my dad, but once you riled him, and I only saw this probably about twice in my whole life, he would stand up for himself without qualms, and you would then be wiped from his life. That is it. There would be no way back. He would have made that decision and that was it. But equally, he was very principled. I do remember one time in my childhood, it was the time when trade reunions, where lots of businesses were closed shops. You had to belong to a trade union. And my dad had been the trade union convener at his factory for many years. And a new person came in and they didn't want to join the union. Now, legally, they didn't have to. And the other members of staff where my dad worked were trying to pressure this young lad into joining the union, which obviously cost per month. And if you've got a young family, and he didn't want to, and my dad as the convener, they said to my dad, you have to make him join. It's a closed shop here. And my dad said, no, it's his choice. If he wants to join, it's fine. If he doesn't want to. So the rest of the staff decided that they would then ostracize this young man and not speak to him at all. They would only have a conversation with him at work if it was required to for the safety of the work. They would just completely cut him out, send him to Coventry. But because my dad wouldn't support them in that, they also did the same to my dad for about 6 weeks at work. And I want you to imagine that. He never told anybody until afterwards, until it had all, but that was the kind of man he was. And for me, I've always had an innate sense of fairness and what's just, and I did that throughout my journalism career. I think that's why I was a journalist for a start, to examine things and look at things. And I bring that to my business. In my sector of PR, there's a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of promises that can never be delivered upon. And it's one of the reasons I started my own business. I did some work experience within other PR companies, and I learned some great things. I learned some good tools to use. But what I mostly learned was that they overpromise and underdeliver, and I will not do that. You have to understand the journey you're going on with PR, and you have to know that it takes time, it takes investment. And even if you're working with someone like me, you know, I can't be Cheryl, I can't be you, I can't have your knowledge, and you have to come on it with me. If you're not prepared to do that, don't do it, do something else. So I think it comes from childhood, but also my experience in business, my experience of being with other people, my experience of working with clients who have set expectations which are unrealistic. I had a client once who kept saying, my goal is to be on question time. And I had to say to him, I'm sorry, but that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I didn't go into why. I'm not going to go into why today, but there was a good reason why. But he wouldn't have it. And he walked away from me because I said, now he's never been on question time. But I will be honest, I would rather someone enters a relationship with me, a business relationship, in a very honest way. They know what's required of me, what's required of them, and they know how long it's going to take. And I don't have to justify that anymore, because I have about 10 clients that I've worked with for 6 or 7 years. And we've been on a really amazing journey set against their goals when it comes to the media. And we're having fun.
What keeps you believing in yourself when the going gets tough?
Whenever I have a bad day or a bad time, like in lockdown, when you, I mean, now's a time that we're all going to be reflecting on. When you know, when lockdown happened, I knew I would lose business because people panic. They panic a lot. So I knew I would. And what I've always done whenever I've had a bad day or anything like that is I say, okay, back to basics, back to what I know. Today I'm going to write stories for the news. I am going to get back to the basics of talking to the clients I work with and I trust. And I am going to deliver. So I kind of will shut myself off, if you like, and just get back to basics, cut out all the noise. And I usually find if I can do that for a day, maybe 2 days, I will bounce back. Another thing I always do, which might sound a bit airy-fairy, but it's always helped me, is go out for a walk. Take my dog for a walk, be at home, be out in nature, because it gives you perspective. It reminds you that, you know, you want all that. It's not the end of the world. This too will pass. And it doesn't change whatever the problem or the issue is, but it enables you to just have a sense of perspective around it.
What are you believing for you as you look to your future? What are you believing for?
I want to carry on what I always find the questions of what you'll be doing in 5 years' time difficult to answer, because I'm so much a person who lives in the now and in the moment. I want to carry on what I'm doing. I want to do more online. This time has taught me that loads of people in business, doesn't matter where they are in the world, but preferably where they speak English or can get a translation, need to work with someone like me to a larger or lesser extent. And some people don't have the budget. So I want to be someone who's accessible for anyone, whatever their budget. And the way to do that is to work online, where people can have a little bit of you and they can employ those skills to their business, have a bit of growth, have a bit of exposure, and then come back. And I'm very passionate about that. I want to work with a variety of people. I'm not driven by money, and the way that translates for me is I don't look at someone and think, oh, they're very wealthy, they're a multimillionaire, they'll be great to work with. Quite often they're not great to work with, because they don't get excited about things anymore, because everything comes down to price tags and how much stuff they've got. That doesn't excite me. I want to be with people who are on a journey, who have goals that are bigger than money, and therefore I try to position myself so that there's a way of connecting with me, whether you've got a big budget or a small budget. Because I'm interested in people and the journeys that they're on, and I want to do more of that. I want to do my first book, and I'm halfway through writing it, I'm pleased to say, and I want to get that out next year. So that's a more immediate goal.
And what advice would you give to anybody starting in business at the moment around this notion of self-belief?
Right, starting a business, it's useful if you've got some money to work with. That really helps. And I would say this: understand when you start a business, it is not all about your product or your service. And it is particularly true for service-based businesses where you are the asset. That it's about 30% what you do, what your expertise is. It's about 30% all the other stuff you've got to do in business, your accountancy, your admin, you're setting things up, and the rest is PR. It's public relations, because if you're not visible, you're not going to have a business, you're not going to make any sales. At a very basic level, think of it this way: the more eyes on you, the more visible you are, the more people you are exposed to, the more sales you will make. It is an inevitable consequence of being more visible. So whatever marketing mix you choose to employ in your business, you need to be visible. And that I say to people, if they're starting in business, you start to have to embrace that concept from the beginning. Also, don't get too much involved in the detail. Don't go down the route of analysis paralysis. Yes, I've done all my research, but I'm going to research this for another year. And, you know, yes, I've got that website and I've invested in it, but I'm going to dive into the detail for another 6 months. All of that is putting off the one thing you need to do, which is start your business and take action. You've got to become pretty balanced in business to be able to have any chance of success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was quite interesting this morning, because I prayed on the interview we were having this morning, and I prayed on, and I was asking for a message, and the one-liner I was given that I've actually made into a visual already actually reads, God is interested in your fruits, not your roots.
Wow, that's amazing. That's hairs on the back of my neck are standing up now. Yeah, I do believe that that's true. And you know, you've got to love what you do. You know, passion and authenticity comes across in leaps and bounds, even via marketing, whether that's your social media or your PR. If you stick at the core with being passionate and authentic in all you do and say, that energy will come across even remotely, even through a computer screen, over a phone, obviously face to face when we're able to do that. And those are the core of good PR. Anyone who works with me will know that. You cannot force a square peg into a round hole. Being successful in business is as much about learning who you are as it is about growing a business, making money, and those kind of things, particularly in the service sector.
So thank you so much for agreeing to this interview this morning. I feel really blessed to have almost like stepped into your family home and history and heard your story. So thank you very much, and I wish you awesome success for the future. Thank you, Fiona Scott.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, everyone.